Hi, you've reached the Talking Racewalking podcast. It's all about racewalking, of course. It's talking to racewalkers from around the world about racewalking. Join me, Noel Payne, a amateur racewalker in Canada, as I talk to elites, Olympians, record holders, masters walkers, and anybody who's out walking as fast as they can. Hi, so this is a section where I'd actually be talking to someone, a race walker. So this is where you can come in. If you know a race walker, you're a race walker, and you have an amazing story, I want to hear from you. So reach out, let's chat, let's get walking and talking. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Talking Racewalking. We're up to episode 5, and I've gone down south of the border, and I've got Emmanuel Corvera here to talk with. So we're going to talk racewalking once again. So welcome, Emmanuel.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I think I've stopped your training session, but I hear you're gonna hit the road right after this the podcast session. So we won't take too long. So I don't want to be another excuse. There we go.
No rush. I'm like, I was thinking about it this morning, and I was really like, it kind of falls within my philosophy of like not giving myself a hard time about training so much anymore. I grew up in athletics, and it's just like the more I try to force it, the harder it gets for some reason. So just go with the flow.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think sometimes being more relaxed about things, racing and training, is actually the way to go. It's just kind of hard sometimes to combine that with being intense about your sport or your passion. So it's that balance. So I hear you. So
exactly.
For those who are not familiar with Emmanuel, I've dug up some stats so I can describe him, and then he can continue on with that. Under 23 silver medalist, 3-time national champion, and darn well, pretty fast, 20K PB. This is what I can find of 126. 10,000 meter on the track, around 42. Pretty fast mile for a walker with 6:09. And recently, you got the privilege of hitting the Pan Am Games. Now that must have been pretty cool. I saw you race walking. I was watching that. 14th there in 136. That's not too bad.
Yeah, on paper, definitely not my best time at the Pan Am Games, but yeah, all that information checks out. Definitely, I've had how should I say, those secret training PBs. So like you tell me a few of those, like those times, like that 10K time has been haunting me. I have not been able to break that for like maybe up to 10 years now. It's a work in progress. Maybe this next year, but yeah, it's I've been around the block. I've been track and field for, I think this is my 23rd year. But the last 8 to 9 years have been race walking. But I mean, I started when I was like 8, I think. And I mean that like I took it seriously. I took it competitively. My dad started taking me to track meets and stuff. And I remember wanting, just that initial desire to be the best. And there were times in grade school where I would come home and I'd be like, hey, Dad, like, what do you think are the chances of me being able to go to the Olympics? And he goes, well, this is my dad. He goes, you could do anything you set your mind to. And he's like, there's always a chance, but you have to train. And so, I was going through high school. I was 100% dedicated runner. All through elementary school, I went like Bantam youth divisions here in San Diego. And then I went to high school, transferred out to college, did 2 years at college. But, that's when it kind of started to set in how competitive it was. And that's, it's ironic because that's where I ran into Tim Seaman. And Tim Seaman, he was my junior college coach at Cuyamaca College. And we gave it two solid years of running. And when I transferred out to San Diego State, and they didn't have a track team, he looked at me and he goes, well, how fast is your 5K time? And I go, well, I could put in like a solid 15 to 15:30, you know, like I was really proud of it, you know, and he goes, you know how many people can do a 15 to 15:30 in the United States? He's like, you should try race walking. And I was like, yeah, you know, you got a good point. And so I gave it a shot. And I remember he would drag me out to the Strand on some practices, and it sucked. Oh my gosh. I think he denies this to this day. He denies this to this day. But the first day of practice, we did 14 kilometers
Of race walking.
of race walking on the first day of practice, because he goes like, I want you to understand exactly what this sport is about, how hard it is. But keep in mind, I was doing like half marathons running and stuff, and I understood the fitness, I understood the technique, so none of that was an issue. I could go 14 kilometers. It was just a matter of how long was it going to take me to recover. So I gave it my best shot. And I think at 13 and a half kilometers, my calf cramped up. And I'm walking next to Rachel. Rachel's team in Canadian Racewalker. I'm walking next to her this entire time. And she goes, oh my gosh, do you want to stop? I'm like, Rachel, the finish line is right there. Like we're 500 meters away. We gotta finish this. And it's a memory I'll never forget. But I got hooked. And I really had an appreciation for it. I'm not gonna say that it was easy getting into it, but there was a lot of I always take things more from the philosophical side or spiritual side, and there was a lot of pride that I kind of had to put aside, dropping running for race walking. It's different, very different. But after giving it a shot, I realized I'm like, this is an opportunity to really start from ground zero and try to build something new. And like representationally, it was a chance for me to kind of rebuild myself as an athlete, because I had already set into such a strong identity as a runner that race walking was like you let me I picked up race walking, and the universe was like, let me show you what it means to suck again at something, you know. Like here's a sport where you're not going to be good for until like a year, you know. So that was fun. Gotta love it.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate as someone who had the midlife crisis, going from being runner to putting more race walk miles. And so I had the same thing. I was,
Yeah.
you know, I've run like 15 mid for you know, it's like being a decent runner, but not being the best and always chasing. And then when I found race walking, you have to start from scratch, and all of a sudden it's a sport as well that requires a little more thinking than running too. So it's definitely a transition. And I love the fact that we just established the Canadian connection. So yeah, so I had forgotten that. Yeah, you had a connection with Tim, and of course Tim's got a connection with Rachel, and Rachel's a Canadian. So there we go.
So she taught me a majority. I mean, Tim coached me for the first like maybe 5 or 6 years. But like walking next to Rachel, I don't quote me on the timeline, because I'm really bad with the facts, but walking next to Rachel and having Tim as a coach was like the best possible thing that could have happened to me. And the fact that everybody was in San Diego was just fingers crossed, good luck, you know. And I remember going out there just being thrown into the fire, because that was, I believe, one of those 2 years of my first 2 years out. Rachel had just finished top 15 in the world, and she was killing it. And Tim was on his way into retirement, and he was still walking 126s, like casually 127s. When I went to that indoor nationals, it was like a rude awakening, you know, of like just how not what I thought it was race walking like was. And so we're talking about like this idea of like really starting over, right? And I remember being so frustrated in my first year that I did want to quit. I wanted to quit because this concept of like, I don't want to be good in a sport that no one does. Like that was a really hard one. That was a really hard one for me. Like I don't want to be good in a sport where there's such a small percentage of athletes. I would rather suck in a sport that everybody does, which is the running, right? because there was just that much pride to do it. Like I thought so highly of myself to do it. And I remember one day it was my brother actually who sat me down and he was like, look, dude, like, you know, you're really good at talking. You're really good at like presenting ideas. And you have to acknowledge like you've been team captain of every single cross country and track team you've ever been a part of. Like, what if race walking needs you more than you need it? And I'll never forget that, because that was like a really big changing point where I was like, I can't have one foot out and one foot in. Like I have to be all in on this if I'm going to give it my best shot. And those couple of years that came afterwards, like being able to train alongside Rachel and having Tim as my coach. And also I'm leaving out, but I was training with Miranda Melville at the time too. I had the best support squad ever. And that really helped me to like really give it a good shot, you know?
Well, yeah, you've that's a great beginning. And for people who are listening here, especially if you're not from the States or from Canada, United States. So Rachel Seaman is a Canadian Olympian, very fast race walker. I've had the privilege to chat with her. Tim Seaman now coaching probably one of the best race walkers the U.S. has seen, multiple national championships, incredible race walker, and a long career. So that's a great start for you. Now, I kind of take these chats and take them where they go. So because you're kind of a fellow runner as well who transitioned, what was it like transitioning? I mean, those folks who haven't done it or chatting, who are listening perhaps who haven't tried race walking, what's it like in your experience going from running to race walking? What did you find the most difficult?
So that's a great question. I'll start off physically. Physically, I think I injured every part of my leg, every part of my legs transitioning, because I was not prepared to, mechanically speaking, I was not prepared muscularly to handle the mileage with that technique. I remember injuring both my Achilles, both my IT bands. I've had multiple hamstring injuries, hips, inside the joint, because I was still trying to get the hip movement, you know, down. I remember how difficult that was trying to grow strong with different mechanics. And then as time went on, you know, I gradually, unfortunately, started to see my quads disappear. and 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 so people were telling me like, oh, like you could still run, right? I'm like, don't ask me to run up a hill. I can't do it anymore. Like cross country is a thing of the past. Road racing up hills, it's like I don't stairs, no, like it's not gonna happen. So yeah, physically it's very demanding, because your body's just not used to moving in that kind of like mechanic, right? Of the straight leg, the amount of strain that it puts on the hamstring and the calf in that straight legged position was not something that I was ready for. So those first 2 years, I really went through like a cycle of trying to strengthen each one of those muscles individually. Mentally, like I touched on it before, but mentally it was kind of devastating, because the race walking is what taught me how to be. It taught me how to treat myself professionally, because you can't not treat yourself professionally when you're training alone 99% of the time. You like, and I don't mean like all the time. Obviously, I was lucky enough to have like training partners, but some of those days where I was like, nobody else is going to get me out the door because I don't have a training group outside of these three people. And so really making yourself responsible for things like that is this massive mental wall that I feel like a lot of people don't ever get past. Like you're asking juniors and young athletes to like, hey, pick up this sport. But guess what? For 6 months straight, you're going to be training by yourself. But at the end of those 6 months, hopefully you'll qualify for nationals. And it's like, that's a really nice carrot on a stick, nationals, right? You get the title, you get to go, you get to be rubbing shoulders with some of the best athletes. That's literally where you meet Olympians and national champions and people from all over the world and all these opportunities. You can make USA versus Canada, right? But 6 months, you're asking a kid to walk alone, to train alone, to go in circles by themselves around the track, it's mentally it's terrorizing. It sucks. And I don't blame people for not being able to make it past the first year. And so I tell people, if you can race walk for 6 months, that's great. You'll probably qualify for something. But if you race walk past a year, you're probably going to stick around. Like it's kind of hard to make it past that first year.
No, I would definitely agree. I think it's I mean, Canada, United States, very similar. We offer almost everybody, whether you're an elite or a masters or a young race walker, you're pretty much on your own. If you've got a club nearby or a couple people to train with, you're usually very lucky. And, you know, as a masters race walker picking up, very similar experience. I think it's not only just someone to train with or try and learn the sport, but it's a little intimidating to go out there and race walk in a country, in a community where race walking is not very well known. So we're often out there doing something that people just think looks strange. So that can be very intimidating as well.
Yeah, my first year of race walking, I was terrified of going out the door in my neighborhood to walk by myself because I was getting name called. I was getting harassed quite a bit. Especially in some of these communities. I can't even tell you like some of the names I've been called. But I remember one time some guy even tried running me off the road with his car, and so that kind of sucked. But it sucked. It really did. And like it was tough because it's like in my heart, I'm like, dude, if only you knew like how confident I am as a runner, like you wouldn't be judging me how I look while I'm walking. Like I'm a pretty friendly person. Like I get along with most people, and like these guys don't know. Everything is, you're talking about an event that is very much judged upon the way that it looks. And it's really just a shame because when people like stick their nose into the event or they come and they watch a sport and they ask the right questions, they're like, oh, so this isn't really much different than running. It's like, no, the philosophy is the same. The training is the same. It's like the supplemental workouts are the same. You know, we're spending as much time in the gym, on a bike, afternoon jogs, doubles, napping in the middle of the day, you know. And I remember that first year, I had to really ask my cousin and my best friend to go run alongside me so that in comparison, anybody who saw could see that I was walking the same pace that other people were running. And that was like, suddenly the compliments started to come in. They're like, oh my gosh, look how fast that guy's, is he walking? Like, he's walking really fast. Oh my gosh. And now everybody in my neighborhood knows me. Like, and I have a pretty popular neighborhood in San Diego, and people wave and they stop and they want to have conversations. When you really start to talk about the opportunities, all of that making fun of people kind of goes away. Like, you've been where? You've been to how many Olympic trials? You've been to how many teams? You've represented the USA how many times? Like, it takes time, but it's very much worth it on the other side, I'd say.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think this as well. I'm kind of known as the walker in my community, and I think as well in Canada, it's still very much like the United States, probably a little bit better simply because we've got Evan Dunphy who's managed to hit the Olympics and get a little more exposure. So there's a portion of the population in Canada that sort of knows about race walking, at least through Evan Dunphy. But I mean, that's not the entire population. So, you know, you go for a walk and there's still a good number of people who have no idea what you're doing. So it is a hard sport to get into. So I've had a few conversations the last couple podcasts about what race walking needs. I think we've kind of beat that horse a little bit. So I'm gonna switch the questions this time, because I think we'd have the same conversation as I've had the last couple times.
I don't know. I've got an opinion that very much just it differs from other people's opinion. I've been told I was wrong many times.
Okay, well let's quickly jump on that then, because I love different.
I've got an answer.
All right, let's do it.
I think you bring up Evan Dunphy, right?
Yeah.
Evan Dunphy, I'm a big Evan Dunphy fan. The guy has a good voice. He's got great opinions. I love having conversations with him because he sticks to his guns and what he believes, and he takes a stand for what he believes in. The reason I say that is because I think that race walking's biggest issue and I've been called controversial for this, but race walking's biggest issue is the race walkers sometimes. like we've got to expose ourselves more, like our opinions and our voices. And that's kind of why I've really tried my best to take a stand for what I believe in on social media and my opinions and stuff, because we need the image. The image is everything. Everybody wants to say that, like, oh well, we need more talent, we need more bodies, we need faster people to transition over. It's like, no, you could still be very fast and very boring. Like it doesn't translate well when you don't have good representation. And I continue to use, I won't say them by name, but there were a few athletes here in the United States who transitioned and were dual sport. They were both runners and they were transitioned over to race walking. And the amount of talent that they had was only one aspect. They had a massive fan base. And overnight, this one athlete, like in the course of 6 months, was probably one of the most famous race walkers in the world. And they weren't even older than 18. Like, it was this incredible phenomenon where I'm like, look, in 6 months, this one single athlete gave more attention to race walking than any Olympian on the face of this earth because of the fan base that they carried over from running. And it's like, that's what we need. And that's just my opinion. Like, we need people, we need characters. I've had this conversation with Nick a million times. We need rivalries. We need the things that make TV shows very interesting. We need good guys. We need bad guys. We need good social media standing. We need people with opinions. It's that, like, you don't become a fan of a sport because of how talented or how fast they are. It's like you become a fan of a sport because of individuals. Like, who I know, and I speak out of inexperience, but how many people got into basketball because of Michael Jordan? Not because they were fans of basketball. How many people got into golf because of Tiger Woods? Not because they were fans of golf, but because they're like, hey, look, there's this guy that I'm a really big fan of, right? So it's the individual that inspires the attention for the sport before, like, nobody cares about the sport. And I don't mean any offense by that, but it's the individual that turns heads. And people are like, I like that guy. I wonder what he's doing. I wonder how he's doing it. Maybe I could do it too, you know?
Yeah, no, I definitely can connect with you on that part. I think, as many other people have talked about, it's a lack of youth. It's a lack of the sport in our school systems. But I think I agree with you as well, because I've mentioned it often too, where you need somebody that you say, hey, I want to be that person. That person's cool. That looks amazing. How do I do it? And yeah, if you don't have somebody visible like a Usain Bolt or somebody else that inspires and motivates people,
Exactly.
you need that. I think we definitely need the grassroots, stuff, the track and field programs for kids. But yeah, if they don't see anybody or can't identify with the sport through, some sort of motivational athlete, they're not going to go, hey, I want to race walk because I saw my 65-year-old grandmother out doing it. It's more, maybe she will, but I think we need more visible race walkers so people go, that's cool, sign me up. Because I think even the masters race walkers or stuff like that, we're inspired by the Olympians and folks like you. Even though we know we're not going to get that fast, but you dream of kind of getting to that level or feeling that kind of speed, and that's what motivates people. So I definitely agree with you on that one.
And it's interesting because you say grassroots, and like that's 100%. Like, we need that. I'm just not a master of that. Like, I don't fully understand. And I know that there are people that are better at working on the grassroots than me. So I don't touch what I know I'm not good at. So I really believe that will also work, getting it into different high school systems, and hopefully one day getting into the NCAA fingers crossed. Like, I mean, God willing, if that ever happens, because it's ironic. I do compliance and eligibility at the college that I'm at, so like I got my nose stuck to the ground about like about like all the updates that happen. So if the opportunity ever comes, I'm gonna recommend it to the NCAA. But the thing is that like I think what really breaks my heart is that this is not just, and this is the larger picture. This is not just a race walking issue. This is a track and field issue. I cannot tell you how many teams I've been on where the most talented, the most professional athletes who are out there every single day training, nobody's ever heard of. Like, who are you in the hammer throw? Who are you in the discus? Nobody is telling their story. And so when I'm having these conversations with them, I'm like, you are the most interesting person I've ever met. You're super easy to talk to, and you're a lot of fun to talk to, but you're not telling your own story. And like I said, this is an overall track and field problem. Our best athletes across the board, there's no exposure. They're not posting on social media, and nobody's posting about them, so nobody's ever heard of them. And people go their entire careers, and it's like, you were one of the best and like nobody knew. Like, that's a problem. That's a very big problem. Not to mention that, we have this cyclical issue of like only caring about the gold medal story. And I hate that. Like there's very few things that crawl under my skin more than when the TV and the media and the news reporters act like only the podium stories matter. And it's like, unless you got a gold medal at the Olympics, we don't really want an interview with you. And don't even get me started, because sometimes they won't even interview the guy who got bronze, like, because it's not as good as gold, right? And if that's the kind of treatment that we're going to give, like, what about the dude who got fourth? You're telling me the guy who got fourth doesn't have an amazing story? Like, maybe that guy, like, was last for like the last 2 years, and he had to work his entire life around to get fourth. I guarantee you there's so many stories where the fourth place guy has a way more interesting story than the gold medal guy. And it's like, it's really just a travesty, right?
Yeah. No,
that's my take.
No, that's
Hot
good.
take, but
I've done a blog series. I wrote a lot of profiles about runners, and often it was Olympians and elites, but often it was the middle of the pack person or other people. And the stories are super interesting. Everybody's got a reason they run or train or race walk. And I'm a communications professional too, so I understand completely. And it's in a world too where everything has gotten so much faster. Everybody's trying to get everybody's attention in a world where everybody's bombarded by stuff. So it is kind of sad sometimes that they have to take like, oh, we only have time for a gold medal or a world record. I mean, we want to grab people's attention. So you don't hear some of the other stories. So that's kind of the reason I'm out here too, trying to do the podcast.
So at USATF Outdoor Nationals at Eugene, Oregon, just this last year, Nick Christie stepped off the track, and I'll never forget this because I was right behind him. He stepped off the track and he goes, "Oh, I got to go to media," and he was very excited to go. And when we went through the media station, you have the entire podium for both the men and the women, because we raced together. They're all walking through the media station, and all these interviewers, they just stare at us and like, hey, and Nick even says out loud, "Hey, does anybody want to interview me?" No, like, I think one person from Flow Track maybe, but that was it. It's like, you have the number, it doesn't matter what event it is, like, you have a number one representative who's an Olympian and a multi-time national champion. It's like, and nobody cares. Like, why don't people care about every story? So, but I'll never forget that. We just walked right through. We walked right through, and nobody asked any questions. It was really sad.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And on that note, we're going to tie it up. And I'm going to give you one last question. I think we both agree that race walking definitely needs some help. It's in a transition, but at the same time, there's lots of cool stuff. Otherwise, both of us wouldn't be still race walking. So exactly. So at the end of this, what's on the line? Give me a short couple minutes as we tie this up. What are your goals for short and long term right now? What's keeping you training?
Um, Training short and long term. Well, we've got the Olympic trials coming up next year. As you and I both know, the standards for the Olympics are getting insanely hard.
Yeah.
And it's getting to a point where like that's not necessarily something that I want to keep on the center of my target. Just because I think when they cut the field sizes shorter, I was like, okay, we're gonna have to redirect here. So my big goal is World Cup and Olympic trials. That being said, this opportunity with the marathon relay could present some doorways to get to the Olympics, considering that the World Cup is going to basically be this massive world Olympic trials. So I think that that's kind of what I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it my best shot. I'm going to try to go to Santee in January for the world team championships marathon relay qualification in San Diego. I'm going to probably race with my wife, so that'll be cool. And then in a few months, we're going to go to World Cup. And then I would really like to be fit for the Olympic trials. Really, really. I think I'm going to treat that as my end all be all. And then anything beyond that is just a bonus. But there are a few teams to make. There's World Cup this year. I believe there's a NACAC seniors, and there's also the Olympics. So there's plenty of opportunities. Day-to-day training, that being said, I remember we're talking about Pan Am games, right? It's like, yeah, that was really eye-opening to be able to see that, like, you know, whether it's fast or whether it's slow, you still have to pick yourself back up and get out the door. So I'm really just training to learn how to appreciate training again. I got into a couple of really good conversations at Pan Am games with some athletes who are very top in their sports. I remember a couple of softball players, fencers, and rhythmic gymnastics I met. And the longevity of sport is something that I'm always concerned about. And it's like how I get asked the question a lot, like, how do you get this far? And I'm like, well, I think you just keep showing up, and then eventually things kind of start to put together. But if you're going to keep showing up, you have to find miniature purposes to keep showing up every day. Which means that which is what I'm doing. I'm trying my best to find peace and happiness with like the goals that I have individually every single day. So long story short, I just set mini goals, and those mini goals aim towards the big goals.
No, I think we can all appreciate that. I think all of us at every level are the same thing. You have the big dream, that big dream we all sort of chase after. Yeah. And the only thing we can control is getting 100% out of ourselves. Where that takes us is sort of out of our control, but you chase after the big dream. So Emmanuel, all the best with training. We'll be keeping an eye on you, and maybe we'll chat again next year after the trials and see where you're at.
I'd love to. That sounds good.
Thanks for being on the podcast. All the best. Keep walking, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Talking Racewalking. We've got our first sponsor on board, so thank you to Reshod Walking Shoes for sponsoring this episode and continuing episodes of Talking Racewalking. Reshod Walking Shoes are designed to keep you moving. Find them at reshod.com. Racewalk shoes designed by Carmen Jakinski from the United States, a racewalker and racewalk coach.